and you're all very welcome to today's Client Experience Programme webinar on using what you know to get the best of who you know. So as you know, the focus of this programme is bringing you practical insights to help your in-house legal teams to be successful. And again, that couldn't be more true in terms of today's session. We're all very familiar with the McKinsey stat that 70% of change programs fail. And largely that's often down to relationships and people. So whether it's engaging with your in-house legal team or with stakeholders across the business or perhaps even outside of the business, relationships are really key to success for all of us. I'm very excited and delighted to welcome back to the programme today Claire McMillan and Zoe Irwin from Denton's Talent Development team. Claire and Zoe will be taking you through today's session. So on behalf of all of the wider team, we hope you enjoy it.
Thanks, Neve, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from today. So this session is all about understanding ourselves better, understanding each other better so that we can work more effectively to achieve greater personal and organisational success and ultimately build better personal and professional relationships. So we've got an hour today and the session is going to introduce a tool that focuses on our social styles to really increase our self-awareness of our own personality, behavioural styles, and also recognise preferences in others. We'll provide some top tips and we'll help you to consider how you can adjust your own style to increase collaboration and also achieve more successful interactions with people and avoid conflict. And we'll also provide a common language around what drives our behaviour in the workplace so that we're all more able to understand each other's styles and flex and adapt to kind of get them more from those interactions. So Neve's already introduced us. I am Zoe and this is Claire, my colleague. And we are really passionate about people and using psychometrics to really understand the behavioural styles of those around us and how you can really leverage those strengths and weaknesses to relate to others more effectively. So we are accredited in a number of different personality tools, psychometrics, and we're going to really strip it back to basics today. So there's no problem if you don't have any prior knowledge before attending our session today. So a bit of housekeeping before we pick off on the content. Do feel free to turn your camera on. It's always lovely to see faces if you're comfortable doing so. We want you to get the most out of the session today, so try to avoid multitasking if you can. But do put yourself on mute just to limit any background noise. But if you feel comfortable, feel free to unmute, ask questions, pop a question in the chat. It's always great to kind of hear from you, and it's part of the experience that we're all sharing today. So do that if you're able to. Thank you. I can see a few of you turn the cameras on now. That's brilliant.
Thank you.
So we are going to move on to a poll. So really keen to know how many of you might have completed a behavioural or personality or social styles questionnaire in the past. So Claire's just launching that for us now, and if you can just give us an indication as whether you've done this before. It may have been DISC, maybe MBTI, perhaps you've used Hogan or Insights before. So we are going to close that poll in 10 seconds. We'll give a couple more people a chance to answer the poll. Mostly yeses on the call today.
Yep. Which is good. A couple of people said they haven't got a clue what we're talking about, Zoe. Well, you're in the right place, I would say.
Yeah,
and a few people have said no. So let me just end the poll just now.
Thanks, Claire.
And I'll share the results with you. Okay, so we've got 74% of you have said yes, that you have completed a behavioural or social styles questionnaire in the past, which is great. So you probably have a bit of an inkling as to what you're in for today. 20% have said no, which is perfect too, because this gives you a starter for 10. And a couple of people have said, we don't actually know what you're talking about. So I'm just going to stop sharing that, Zoe.
Thanks very much, Claire. So moving on. Oh, looks like it stopped working. There we go. So what are the benefits of focusing on behavioural styles at work? Before we go into much detail about what they are, how can the knowledge of this really help us? So the key factor here is adaptability. You know, it's really important to know your own behavioural style and those of the people you interact with, because once you know this, you can really adapt your own style to ensure good relationships with the people around you. So in terms of how this is really helpful, it's about strengthening relationships with others, so building that better understanding between each other. And you can improve communication if you can understand this, and which it might improve your teamwork and your productivity as well, and also help you to predict and anticipate behaviour. You know, this might lead to reducing unproductive interpersonal and organisational conflict as well. We can enable a more personalised management approach for our direct reports, so we can really tailor, adapt our style to different team members. And we can also get insight into how clients and teammates operate. This can obviously help with problem solving, decision making and handling conflict. So there's lots of fantastic benefits around focusing on this stuff at work.
Absolutely. I think in a nutshell as well, Zoe, it is a predictor of behaviours. So for those of you who have already done it before, you'll have seen the type of reports that you get from it. And it's really just about predicting your own style. And then what we're hoping to do today is bend and shape that style to suit those relationships, as Zoe has just said. But, you know, we're not going to play the ABBA songs, yeah, the knowing me, knowing you, but you know, the sentiment is right. You know, Aristotle once said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. And really applying that quote to our topic or our subject of today, it's right. You know, in order to get the best from who you know, you first have to concentrate on the knowing me part. And then you can move on to focusing on the knowing you. Okay, so this is a really basic model, you know, so observation is key. Perception, you know, and how you perceive somebody else's style is key. But let's focus on the knowing you part for the next couple of slides. So before we kick off, I'd like you to grab a piece of paper, and we're going to go back to this piece of paper, you know, a couple of times. So make it a big one, whether it be a notepad, a spare bit of scrap paper, just something for you to write on. And on the screen just now, you should see a whole collection of words. What I'd like you to do is to choose and note down 6 words that you think describe you best. I would say to you, don't overthink it. There's some of us in the room that are probably quite good at that. Just pick those words that stand out to you and that you think really align, you know, with you. And I'll give you a few moments to do that. Okay, so now what you're going to see is that each word now has a colour. So to make things even easier for you, we've put them into alphabetical order so that you can find them better. So what I need you to do is look at the list, find those words that you had written down that best describe you, and beside each of those words, write down the colour that you can see on the screen for that word. So, you know, whether it be an R for red, Y for yellow, you get the picture, you know, and then I need you to count them. So, and determine which colour you have the most of. Give you another second to do that. Mostly yellow, as Becky has said. Great, Becky, thank you for that. And you used to be red. Well, it might change as we go through. Juan says green. Perfect. Well, I'm going to launch the poll, or we're going to launch the poll now. And that's exactly what I need to see, is what is your most dominant colour? Is it blue? Is it red? Is it yellow? Is it green? I'm going to take a note of it. Okay, so it should be on screen for you just now. So lots of people selecting. Blue and green seem to be winning the race just now, with green, you know, right out there in front.
Another 20 or so people's votes to come through, Claire.
Grey. Kerry said, yeah. That bit in the middle, Kerry.
A few more seconds before we close the poll.
Hi, sorry, I've got an even split of blue and red, so that's not here.
Yeah, there's always one, Sue.
So
There's always one.
So sorry.
Me too, actually. Mine's a bit of a mess. I have 2 reds, 2 yellows, 1 green.
Okay,
I'm all over the place.
I mean,
God.
listen, there's 2 then. There's always 2, isn't there?
Oh.
No, honestly, don't worry about it. So what we'll do is, you know, you don't have to answer this one. We're going to do the poll again a bit later when we've done a bit more explanation around about the colours, and we can see where you think that your most dominant style. To be fair, you will be a mix of all of these styles and all of these colours. It's just probably you've got a natural go-to or a natural preference.
Here are the results shared on screen, Claire. So we have just annoyingly, there's green on 13 out of 38 that have completed the poll.
Okay, I am going to take a note of these, Zoe. So blue 32%, 16% on red, 18 on yellow, and 34 on green. And we'll revisit that back at the back end of the session today. Thanks for that.
Great, brilliant. So we're going to move on now to talk a bit about preferences and what we mean by this. So in order to consider what we mean by preference, what I would like you all to do is just to fold your arms in the normal way. Fold your arms, give them a cross, and just notice how it feels with your arms crossed. And then what I'd like you to do is just to get your arms again, unfold them. I just want you to cross them in the opposite way to the way that you just crossed them. And then consider how that felt. How did that feel the first time versus the second time? Now, for most people, the first time feels really natural. It feels very comfortable, it feels easy. Whereas the second time it feels a bit awkward and uncomfortable and very unnatural. However, if we left our arms in that position for a while, you know, at some point we're likely to flip our arms back to our normal, most comfortable preference. So it's not that we couldn't do it, it's not that we can't do it, it's just that it's not our most natural preference. And it's the same with our behavioural preferences, what we're going to be talking to you about today. So we have a habitual way of responding, a preference for doing something in a certain way. If asked to do things differently, we're very able to do that but it requires a bit more conscious effort. It requires a bit more energy. It doesn't always feel natural or easy to do. But in time, without continuous conscious effort, we often go back to that typical, natural, more comfortable preference that I've described for you there. And if we think about preferences, and as we talk about the model today, as Claire has already suggested, you know, with your question there's 4 different social styles we'll be talking about. And actually, we can all be a mix of all of those 4 styles. We do tend to have a preference for one particular style over another. And this, of course, can change depending on the circumstance or the situation that we find ourselves in. But we do tend to have a preference, a go-to. So it's important to note there's no better or worse, there's no right or wrong style. All of the 4 styles that we're talking about today are equally valuable. The model does categorise people according to personality traits, according to observable behaviours, but it's not meant to pigeonhole you or box you in or define you. It's merely intending to outline someone's preferences so that you can really maximise your personal and professional relationships. And all styles actually have their own strengths. They have their own possible pitfalls and weaknesses. But actually, you're the best judge of your own preferences. And this isn't about someone's knowledge or skills or abilities. So that's really important to mention as we journey through the session today. So I'm going to hand you over to Claire now to talk you through the model that we're going to be discussing.
Perfect. So thanks, Zoe. I'm going to go back to that piece of paper again. So hopefully you've got an area that you can draw quite a large plus sign, you know, so a vertical and a horizontal intersecting each other through the middle. So we're going to put the Merrill and Reed social styles model into use. And firstly, we're going to plot you. You know, so during their studies, Merrill and Reed discovered that people's behaviour follows 2 continuum, and they've labelled those continuum assertiveness and responsiveness. Now, the assertiveness and responsiveness continuum, they're actually represented by the horizontal and the vertical lines that you should have on your paper. So firstly, we're going to concentrate on that assertiveness scale. Now, that's your horizontal line, okay, as you can see on the screen. And a level of assertiveness or assertion, if you like, is described as the degree to which a person's behaviour or behaviours are seen by others as being forceful or directive in style when they're getting things done. So thinking about your communication. Are you more of an ask person, or do you tend to tell people what you want or need? In your emails, are your emails more directive, or do you do a bit of personal relationship building prior to that? So let's look at it a bit further and break it down a bit more. So if you're somewhere on the left of the scale, so nearer that ask side of the scale, then you may consider yourself as being, a bit reserved, so a bit maybe slow to reveal your opinions, perhaps someone who's fairly easygoing and happy to go with the flow without too much open resistance, someone who could potentially be a bit tentative at times, whether that be with decisions, maybe questions or requests. Perhaps you don't like to impose, you wouldn't, if there was somebody in the office and the door was closed, you perhaps wouldn't go and chap the door and make your presence known. You would perhaps, come away and wait till that door opens of its own accord. Perhaps you're someone who listens intently and makes really considered decisions, or someone who asks lots and lots of questions. I would say generally, we would consider, those people on the ask side of the scale, generally, quite a fairly quiet individual. And now remember, this is a continuum, so you can be anywhere on that scale. Conversely, you may think you're more to the right of that scale, which means others, may see, or you may consider yourself as being someone who's not afraid to share their views or opinions. So, perhaps quite outspoken. You can be seen as to assert them yourselves and be perhaps a bit demanding in terms of having your needs and wants fulfilled. Perhaps you're quick and happy to make decisions, so people consider you to be really quite a decisive individual. You could be seen as being forceful in your behaviour, perhaps, sharing your views and sharing your comments. Perhaps you've got a tendency to direct people, to get what you want rather than encourage that engagement naturally. People on the right-hand side of that scale, they've got real focus. They really very much focus on the task and on delivering those outcomes. And perhaps, you're pretty direct, you're not afraid to confront or challenge people when you feel your opinions or your views aren't being considered or heard. And you're always active, on the go, always spinning those plates, and, quite good at spinning those plates at the same time. Now, as I said, you can be anywhere on the scale, but what I'd like you to do is pop a cross on the axis where you think you sit. Okay. And then moving on then. So you should have a cross on your horizontal axis, moving to that vertical scale, or the y-axis. So this continuum denotes a responsiveness. And responsiveness is defined as the degree to which a person's behaviours are seen by others as being emotionally responsive or expressive, or emotionally controlled. So very responsive people tend to react noticeably to their own emotions or to the emotions of others. Less responsive people are perhaps a bit more guarded in their emotional expression. So you've heard the expression, that person wears their heart on their sleeve. That's someone with high responsiveness. So in essence, this dimension of behaviour measures the degree to which others perceive a person as control, or somebody who tends to control, versus display their feelings and emotions when they're interaction. So that's control versus emote. And sometimes you see that as you'll see that as a label. So you'll notice that the scale's slightly different, and that the low responsiveness sits at the top of this continuum. And that's normally, as I say, labelled as that control. High responsiveness is at the bottom. Those people at the bottom tend to be really people. They take their energy from the people around about them. So let's look at some of the behaviours, some of the verbal behaviours that you may see, and the non-verbal behaviours related to that continuum. And I do see the side of I've got a few questions in the chat, so let me cover this and then we'll go back to the chat. So those verbal and non-verbal cues that you might show to others. So firstly, emotion in your voice. If you're at the high end of the continuum, there's lots of emotion, lots of inflection, and your tone really has the risk of letting people know how you feel, whether that be anger, whether it be excitement, or so on. If you're low responsiveness, you're much more in control of what other people hear from you. They'll only hear the emotion in your voice that you want them to hear. They'll only see, those facial expressions that you want them to see. I would say, it says monotone on the screen. I would say that's a bit harsh, but you can get the picture. Subjective speech, for people with high emotion, they'll have a focus on people, and be very much about the people and asking opinions, etc. Low emotion, you'll hear a lot about the task. Okay. Descriptors, opinions and stories for high responsiveness. So, they might say something like, I once knew someone in that same situation and he or she did this. But if you're low responsiveness, those people tend to talk facts, data. So they'll say things like, so studies show that, or I've seen the analysis of that, etc. Then we've got the non-verbal behaviours or the body language. High responsiveness use their whole body to speak. So that full person is animated, their emotions written all over their face. They can't hide what they're feeling, so you'll see it in their face. Low responsiveness, so much more controlled. Okay, lots less hand gestures and very controlled facial expressions. Posture for high responsiveness is fairly casual, and low responsiveness, you probably see something that's a bit more formal. So what I'd like you to do is cross the line where you feel you sit on that responsiveness continuum in the same way as you did with the assertiveness one, and then we'll join the dots. So you're drawing a straight line either up and down from your assertiveness axis, and then that horizontal line either left or right, so that the two of them cross over in your responsiveness axis. Okay, so where those lines intersect, and that'll tell you the quadrant that you're in. Okay, let's have a look. So we've got a question here from Jacob, and it says, what if you're closer to one side in certain situations and closer to the other in other situations? I think that's a really, really good observation and awareness of self, Jacob, first and foremost. But that is true of anything. So if, for instance, I'll tell you that I'm an analytical person, I'm off the chart analytical, but when we put ourselves into a training situation, I push up my expressiveness, which will make sense to you after here. So you can absolutely, depending on the situation you find yourself in, you'll find that you will pull on different styles and different strengths to make sure that you either meet the needs of the situation or you get that task done. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a good explanation, Claire.
Perfect. Thanks for that. Thanks for the question, Jacob. Okay, so let's look at where you plotted yourself. So if you're in the top right quadrant, okay, so you'll see yourself, or your main style is what we call a driver. If you've plotted yourself bottom right, then your main style or your go-to style is expressive. If you're bottom left, then your main or go-to style is what we call amiable. And top left, this is the one I am, your main style is that analytical style. And you will note, or you will see that these colours correspond with the word exercise that we did earlier. But what I'm going to do just now is hand over to Zoe, and we'll start to look at each one in a bit more detail.
Thank you, Claire. So the first style we're going to look at is this top right quadrant, and this is called the driver style. So this is the typical task orientated behavior that prefers to tell rather than ask. So this style, they care more about results, and they're driven by that need for achievement, less likely to show concern for feelings. It's a very fast-paced style. They're keen to make decisions, take power, exert control. So it's a very efficient, results-driven behaviour that you see, and this could inevitably compromise on and sacrifice personal relationships. So the driver style being more task-orientated, you'll see this kind of action, the action-oriented. So it's better to do something rather than nothing kind of mindset, perhaps. They don't always get it right. That's not their goal. A good hit rate is enough. They're determined, they're demanding, they're fast-paced. So this style, they make quick decisions, they speak quickly, walk quickly. They expect deliverables yesterday. They are results-driven, decisive. you know, they're willing to shift. You know, they do have very strong opinions, but if they see their approach isn't working, they're willing to adapt quickly, which can surprise or alarm other styles as well. And they're strong-willed, so they're highly independent. You know, they want to be in control. You know, they're focused on the bottom line. So that's the red driver style. And just to move on to give you a bit more detail around how they may see themselves. So if we're using our driver style, people may see themselves as efficient. You know, they, as we said, they deal with the situations quickly. They use time efficiently to kind of get down to business, and they don't like to waste time. You know, they're resourceful. They get things done. You know, they work at a fast pace and they're confident. You know, they assert themselves. They want to be in control, and they're very decisive. And if we think on the flip side about how others may see themselves, so how others may see them, sorry. So they may see them as impatient with those that are slower paced than them, perhaps autocratic because of their desire to always be in control and maybe make decisions with little input from others. They could be seen as overcritical, but you know, it's a very direct style. Perhaps, you know, they may be too blunt at times, perhaps insensitive, showing minimum concern for relationships and more concern for the results, and domineering and demanding, so keen to kind of make decisions, take power, exert control. So, you know, the weakness of this style, I guess, is quite evident from the description, in that there could be a frequent unwillingness to listen or accommodate the needs of others. And if we move on now to the bottom right quadrant, so this is called the expressive style. So this is also an assertive style like the driver style, but they use feelings more to achieve objectives. So this behaviour is a slightly more spontaneous behaviour. So they demand recognition and approval, and they use their gut instinct when it comes to making decisions. So the social expressive style is a people-orientated style, much more on the tell side. And you'd see them as very friendly, entertaining kind of style in terms of their charismatic presence. They're full of energy, so they may talk first, think later, have an abundance of energy and enthusiasm, and always ready to kind of embrace the next big thing. So they share their emotions really freely. They're sociable, so they get their energy very much from others, and they're energized by those connections, and they'll pick up the phone rather than send an email. You know, they'd much rather meet face to face and talk and have a conversation. And another word we've got there is dynamic. So, you know, big ideas people, they're full of bold new ideas and big statements, and they like those eye-catching projects. And impulsive too. So often, as I said, going with their gut on what maybe feels right. As a result, they may make more mistakes than most, but this is kind of considered to them part of getting things done. You know, they get easily bored, and actually they prefer not to be bogged down with some of those details. So a little bit more detail about the expressive style, and people may see themselves as innovative and enthusiastic, you know, that creative style, getting excited about ideas, motivational, fast and reactive, you know, quite upbeat, as we said, with that high energy, ambitious, friendly and warm, you know, as we said, love connecting and being involved with other people and with things. And on the flip side, how others may see them. So perhaps overconfident and exaggerated, so they may appear perhaps to dominate conversations too much or finish other sentences. Overexcitable could be something, maybe too much animation, too in your face, I don't know, perhaps too impulsive in their interactions. Undisciplined is another one, so maybe they find it hard to stay on track or could go off on tangents or lose focus, and also lacking follow through, so not always interested in the details and perhaps lacking some structure, and daydreamers as well. So Claire's going to talk now about the final two styles, so I'll hand back to Claire.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. So the next style is our green or our amiable style. You know, so the amiable style is very much a people style. You know, they express concern for people above all else. They're really keen to share emotion and not necessarily to assert themselves over others. That's not comfortable for them. They can do it, but it's not a comfortable position for them to be in when they have that, or when they're using their amiable style. So building and maintaining relationships really dominate their style, and they're very, very good at it. You know, they're people, they're great at building and maintaining those relationships. So the amiable social style, as I say, it's people orientated. They enjoy a collaborative approach to tasks and projects, and they're really good at getting people on board and getting their input. They've got a really patient and friendly style, and they're really supportive of others, and they're often seen as being warm and relaxed in their approach to others. They enjoy and they value contribution, you know, so they value their own contribution, and they like to be consulted, but they also enjoy consulting other people because they place value in seeking it out, asking questions to get to the bottom perhaps of what maybe a particular client wants or what they need. They're really personable and will be seen by others as being warm, friendly and easygoing, and they're sensitive to other people's feelings and emotions. They're very much sensitive individuals themselves. They enjoy stability, and particularly stability and certainty within that working environment. Now, when we're using our amiable style, we actually might see ourselves as being supportive of others. We're great team players and we'll be active within the team, providing support where it's necessary. We're really collaborative, you know, seeking others' views. If you're planning a night out, for example, the amiable in you will get consensus from the group and where you want to go, and making sure that the majority are actually happy with the decision. Being patient and cooperative, you know, so the amiable people tend to display a lot of patience, you know, because they appreciate the thoughts and feelings of others. That's really paramount to them. They consider issues carefully, so they're really thorough thinkers, you know, particularly when people are involved, and building that consensus. So that's linking back to the point about being collaborative and seeking the views of others. So they work really hard to build consensus to be able to move forward. You know, and when others don't share our style, they may see us as slightly different, you know, so they might actually see us as being quite slow to make decisions, you know, so we've got to consider all of those options before we make a decision, and then we go back to them with that decision. They also might think that we're submissive, to others' needs. So we put the needs of others before our own needs, you know, if we feel that it's going to help or support the cause. We're reluctant to go against consensus, so it's not natural for us to want to upset that apple cart, as they say. You know, we'd rather go along with it than speak up. And perhaps we sometimes are a bit anxious about making a wrong decision. And that's a natural trait, I would say, for overthinkers. You know, if they make the wrong decision, then they really beat themselves up about it. And some might view us as lacking drive and oomph, you know, because at that people side, and particularly when at the less assertive, you know, low assertiveness, then the natural pace is a bit slower. You know, they're sometimes perceived as lacking that drive and the oomph. You know, I guess, you know, it's a bit more like we need the handbrake within a team, you know, and sometimes the analytical style and also the amiable style can be that handbrake, and they keep everybody in check. So let's move on to that analytical style. So the analytical individual will assert themselves by asking rather than telling. You know, they've got a high level of emotional control, and they value facts, logic and accuracy, you know, and they present a disciplined and unemotional, some would say, you know, they're quite cold. You know, they present that unemotional face to the world. They have a real need to be right about things, so a bit of a perfectionist, and therefore they adopt a highly deliberate, data-driven approach to making decisions. So, but they hold their cards really close to their chest, and they don't commit until they're certain. So the analytical style is very much task-orientated, but more ask-orientated. And those who share that style or preference, they're really precise, you know, so we've got high standards for ourselves and for others. Detail orientated, as I've already mentioned, and they expect to deliver quality work. They're methodical, so they're really systematic and well organised, and they like to take a structured approach to that delivery. Data, you know, if we're going to make a decision, they're going to make a decision not based on the heart, it will be based on the head. So it's based on the data, and the more data that they have, the better. And then questioning, and this can sometimes cause frustration from some of the other types, but those people on the lower or the less assertive, so towards the ask side of the assertiveness scale, they really need to ask lots of questions to understand and make sure they've got all of the detail to satisfy their needs. And the analytical could be seen as being pretty formal in their communication and body language. And this really comes from their high standards. So when you've got an analytical style, you may see yourself as being quite serious and exacting. It's the detail and the attention to detail. We need it, makes us feel calm, but also from the lack of focus in people, which gives us a perception of being serious. So when I say lack of focus in people, it just means that we're not necessarily that people orientated. In fact, we probably focus a bit more on getting the task done and not that people element. Logic and rational, pretty sure this comes from having to weigh up all of the information before we make a decision. Really focused on the goal. So we're focused on the task, the outcome. We know what we have to do to get there. We're precise, we're considered, we weigh up all of the options. So important, it's really important to us, whether it be, a purchase or perhaps a project. We're great at planning, so everything is planned to within an inch of its life. So if you think that you're probably quite high in blue, think about your holiday, the itinerary that you put together before you go. And reserved, we're often seen as being quite reserved and very much in control of our emotions, particularly what we allow other people to see. But those perhaps people who don't share our style see us as being stubborn. We like what we like. And we ensure that quite a lot of the times that's what we get. So we can seem to be stubborn to others. The need for perfection seems to others that we're being a bit nitpicky and perhaps a bit pedantic. And that perfectionist, we don't compromise. We need to have it as perfect as we possibly can. Unemotional, there's so much control in that emotion, and because that we don't not consider people, but the people decisions aren't foremost in our mind. The task is foremost in our mind, and we can come across to others as being quite cold. Indecisive, some people might say, we want to make sure that we choose the best option, so we'll research the topic to death. We'll exhaust every TripAdvisor report or review, on John Lewis to make sure that we're really equipped with the right information before we make that final decision. So this takes us on quite nicely. We and Sue, this is probably where you'll be able to perhaps separate yours out as well. So based on where you plotted yourself on the grid, and the information that Zoe and I have just shared with you, has your colour preference changed from the exercise we did with the 6 words? Do you have a more dominant colour? And we're going to poll again. So what is your colour preference based on the information that you have now? Okay, so quite a few of you voting so far. So blue is sitting at 25%. It's 32 earlier. Driver, so the reds is 19%. That's been up slightly. At expressives, 22. So that's the yellows, and the amiables, 35. Okay, still a couple of you to vote, so we'll give you another couple of seconds.
Thanks, Claire. I'll close that now.
Perfect, thanks. So a bit of a change, the blues have come down a bit, Zoe. Reds up ever so slightly. Yellows, so our expressive has gone up again, and green is round about, the same. So we've got 24, 19, 22 and 35%.
Brilliant.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you. So this next section is looking at recognising and adapting. So this is about how can we alter our own behaviours to suit the needs of the clients, the people, our colleagues, the people we interact with, to kind of make the most of those relationships and interactions. So before we go into that, I just wanted to remind you that the behavioural styles are not inclusive of all the elements that make up personality. So behavioural styles, they just focus on one aspect of personality, and that's that direct, observable, visible behaviours that we can see. So really just to reinforce that this is not about our whole personality, simply those behaviours. So the behaviours being what Claire went through earlier in terms of what you say, you know, the verbals, you know, what you do, some of the non-verbals that we can see. Whereas the personalities, you know, it's a combination of our ideas, our values, our hopes and dreams and abilities. So the social styles, it's about looking at those patterns of actions that others can see and observe, and that helps to kind of describe people's behaviour. So that's what we're talking about today. So Claire, we're going to run through the plot exercise again.
Almost a rookie mistake there, and sorry, my dog, somebody's just come to the front door, so I did think that was going to happen at some point during the session. Let me just close this door.
So yeah, you ready for that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm good to go, sorry. So we're going to go through that same plotting exercise again. You know, this time we're going to plot either one of your clients, perhaps a team member, and we'll use the knowledge that you have about the various styles and all the information that we've already shared on that assertiveness and responsiveness continuum. You know, so have a quick think about who that person is, draw another big plus sign on that spare piece of paper, and we'll start with the assertiveness continuum. So if you remember, we said this is about the observable behaviours, perhaps being forceful, the ask versus the tell, and I've popped the descriptors on screen for you. So if you make a mark on the continuum where you believe the person that you're thinking of sits. So remember, this is your perception, and it has to be done through your experience of them. Okay. So are they more towards the ask, or are they more towards the right-hand side in that tell? And then we'll move to the responsiveness continuum. So this one, if you remember, is about the level of emotion others see in our interactions, in our communications. You know, are we more control, or are we quite emote, you know, in terms of, do people see, is it written all over our face? Do they see it? And again, those descriptors are on screen for you just now to plot onto your grid, wherever you feel the person that you're thinking of actually sits. And we're going to do exactly the same thing again, you know, so we're going to join the dots and, you know, just see whether or not that person comes out in the driver side. So top right, are they expressive? Are they amiable? Are they analytical? And we're going to then move on to, you know, if you know the style of that individual, what can you do to change or adapt your own style to connect better with that person? I'm going to hand over to Zoe.
Great. So hopefully you've all plotted your person that you're thinking of, and we're going to talk first about the driver style. So if your person has a preference, you think, for the driver behavioural style, and you don't, you can absolutely adapt your style to better connect with them. So the first tip we have for you is about being prepared. So being prepared and focused for your meeting with them. So being direct and to the point, you know, as you know, they like to get things done, they like to focus on the task, the results and the outcome. So it's about matching your pace to that person, you know, being assertive with them. Using the time efficiently, so not being too relaxed. You know, you've heard that they make quick decisions, they speak quickly, walk quickly, you know, they expect your deliverables yesterday. So it's about using that time with them efficiently. And structuring your message. So whether that be meeting them in person or a written message, you know what it is that you want to get across, and be concise and to the point and business-like. Anticipate the questions or challenges in advance that may come up, and, you know, be really organised and factual with your information. If you do meet resistance with reflective questions, you know, drivers have got strong opinions. So if you have some things prepared, some reflective questions, you know, they are willing to adapt and they're willing to change. So do think about that. And then communicating with confidence. So it's about translating your ideas into action, you know, being confident, you know, what are we going to do then? How soon can we do it? You know, having some really powerful things to respond with. And then when the business is over, go, and they'll be pleased. So that's our top tips for getting the best of a driver style. And then moving on to the expressive style. So if the person you've identified has an expressive style, you can really embrace their style by reflecting their enthusiasm and their pace. So being upbeat, you know, adopting a positive attitude and really showing energy and optimism. So we know that this style is a friendly, sociable style. So, you know, being prepared to talk on a personal level, you know, have a chat about the weekend, you know, small talk, you know, things you may have in common, that's all great. They are quite animated. So painting mental pictures for them can be very helpful. And it's about being open, direct and flexible, you know, as I've mentioned, they're chatty, so you may find yourselves going off on a tangent when you have conversations. So be ready to kind of bring it back to business. You know, you don't want to overburden them with detail, to keep things high level and big picture. They like to kind of link their ideas, as I said, to the big picture, so you can almost build on their creativity. You know, be willing to look for the new, exciting, innovative aspects of the message or the discussion, and that will really get the most out of them. Be clear on expectations and outcomes with an expressive. So following up on the specifics or the agreed actions is really helpful. And valuing feelings and opinions. So we know that it's a people-orientated style. So really paying attention to that. And involving them, you know, we know they're interested in taking people along with them, so involving them and in things and getting them involved as much as possible. So I'm going to hand back to Claire, who's going to cover off the final two styles.
Perfect, thanks, Zoe. So if you plotted your person as amiable and you don't share the same style as them, so you can adapt your style in a number of ways. So perhaps, you know, you'd be thinking about they like to be consulted because they're not naturally confrontational, so they enjoy positive relationships, you know. So you may have to think about being prepared for some chit chat. It might not come naturally, you know, to talk personally prior to your meeting or on your email, but be prepared to have some chit chat before you get down to some real business. Ask them how they are. Even better if you can ask them about specifics, you know, family members by name, you know, dogs, cats. So being really friendly and showing interest in them personally. Make suggestions, not statements. You know, so you would be thinking about, do you think such and such would work? Or tell me how you think that would work in practice. Or what would the outcome be? You know, in the back of your head, you might actually be thinking, you know, it just won't work. But they don't necessarily like that really direct style. So perhaps making those types of statements, those types of suggestions rather than statements. Be patient and supportive, you know, so appreciate that their style is different from you, and that goes for all of the styles. So you have to adapt to suit that style. Be informal, be open, be honest, communicate at their pace, make sure you include the human dimension of the situation, so they will want to know how others may feel about the matter, you know, who else perhaps is going to be involved in it, past experience of similar situations. Deal with concerns and demonstrate benefits, you know, allow them to ask questions, sell them the benefits, summarise frequently, you know, to allow them to gather their thoughts. They're not as fast paced, neither is the analytical as, you know, the expressive and the driver. They really need to digest that information. So give them space and time for feedback, for decisions, and don't expect them to make that decision there and then. So you might need to, you know, present your thoughts, let them think about it, or reflect and come back with the comments. So you might find that your amiable or your analytical person in a meeting, they perhaps don't share their thoughts straight away, but they might message you after that meeting to tell you what they think because they've digested that information. And then moving on to the analytical. So if you remember, the analytical was very focused on facts, data. They enjoy structure and making decisions based on knowledge and experiences rather than gut. You know, they think to speak. So they may seem overly quiet, perhaps in meetings. I've already mentioned that actually, but you know, they don't necessarily consider themselves particularly good at small talk. And if you don't share that analytical style, then you can adapt your own style to meet somewhere in the middle. You know, so if you have a meeting, be on time, be well prepared. They really enjoy agendas and points for discussion because it helps to keep that meeting streamlined for them. Support your statements if you have it with proof, with facts, with figures. They like to know when they're given information that it's correct. And if you have data to support it, then that's all the better. Be really structured and clear in your communication, stay on topic. For some of the other styles, it's really easy for the topic of the conversation perhaps to veer off. And that becomes really frustrating for an analytical style. You know, so if you don't share that style, make a conscious effort to keep to plan. Give them time to reflect and think. Again, you know, a bit like that amiable style, they need space to make those decisions. You know, again, I've already mentioned this, but think about those analyticals, and we had 24% of you that were analytical. Think about those purchases that you make, those decisions, for instance, for your house, those big buys are never made quickly. You probably look at reviews, compare the key points, lots of options, you know, which leans to that logical approach, weighing up those pros and cons. So you need to give them time to make those decisions, consider all the detail, have those strong agendas. Don't be too informal. They're not always comfortable with that personal talk, but as everybody knows, that a little personal talk is essential to building those strong relationships. Be objective, state logical alternatives. So if we do this, then this might happen. However, if we do this, then this is what we can expect. Okay, and if you don't know, find out, don't make it up. All right. Sometimes in some of the other styles, they're quite happy to kind of go along with what they think the answer could be, you know, so that's the heart and their intuition that's telling them. But the analytical style, that's and also the driver style, don't make it up. Have your facts, your figures and everything handy for you. Okay, so just to kind of do a bit of a roundup, we've introduced you to that tool, or the tool to help you identify your own personality styles and also help you recognise preferences in others. We've provided you with some strategies and some tips to help you consider, you know, how and what you can do to adjust your style to different people, you know, to maximise those relationships and ultimately, you know, get the most out of them and avoid conflict. So we are opening the floor. We've got quite a few minutes left. We're opening the floor and we're happy to answer any questions that you have. Whether you want to put them in the chat or whether you want to take yourself off mute, it would be good to hear from you. And if you don't have any questions, then we have one final question for you.
We are able to share the deck as well. Someone has asked that question, so we will certainly do that with you. I think, Niamh, you say to ask them to email you.
That's right, Zoe. So just drop us a note to cxprogram@dentons.com and we're happy to share the deck. We'll have a recording as normal next week. And I'll link to that. And Zoe and Claire have also got a really practical handout takeaway that maps out some of these, you know, interactions with other individuals. So we're also happy to share that.
Perfect. Thanks, Niamh.
We may have a question here. Sue has come off mute. Hi, Sue.
Hi. Sorry, I was just wondering again, sorry, if you can repeat, what's the email address to get a copy of the presentation? I didn't hear.
Sure, no problem, Sue. We actually have it on the next slide.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so just to make it easy for everyone, or maybe the next two, let's move on a little bit just to the last slide. Yeah, excellent. So that's cxprogram@dentons.com. For anyone that just wants to make a note, but equally, if you pop your name in the chat, we'll also pick it up. Great.
Thank you.
Carrie's popped it in as well for us.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that. Just before, actions are really important for us. So, you know, as a training team, so I would like to hear from you either what is your key takeaway from the session today, or what you're going to really commit to doing differently moving forward. And again, you can take yourself off mute, but you pop your responses into the chat. So your key takeaways, if there are any from today, and what you're going to do differently in terms of moving forward with the information that you have.
Tanya. Let's have a appreciating the handout. Of course, we'll share that. Thank you. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. Becky, adapting style to the colours of the person that you're working with. So yeah, really understanding how you might be able to flex according to those different styles we talked about. Fantastic. Thank you, Becky. Priyesh, we've got and the circumstances too. So yes, absolutely, depending on the scenario, the situation, which of those styles is going to get you the most out of that interaction. Fantastic. Karen, taking a more considered approach to dealing with others. Brilliant. Natalie is going to recognise the different working styles and that there are benefits to all of them. Absolutely, there's no better or worse, as we said at the start. They've all got their strengths, and it's great to look at them all in a positive light.
Absolutely, and depending, you know, on your situation, you may actually not go to your natural style. You could be dialing up on an other style, so you know you will be a combination of them all. So yeah, it's good to recognise that there are different styles, but also you have all of these different styles in you as well. You just need to align to whatever best suits that situation.
Mm-hmm. Being more conscious about how others may perceive me with my working style and adjust to other styles to get better results. Yeah, so how we perceive ourselves could actually be quite different to how other people might perceive you. So really, really good to notice and recognise the difference there and adjusting our styles. Fantastic. Thank you, Sharon.
Perfect.
Great.
Adapting working style from Sue, it's a real balance. So being true to yourself and bringing your best self to work. Absolutely, Sue. And you do have to be authentic. And I guess that as long as it's coming from a place of authenticity within, then that should be quite a straightforward thing for you to do. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for popping your thoughts into the chat. Just a final comment from Havona. Every positive attribute can also be negative, so it's important to pay attention to reactions. Absolutely, what we see as being positive, we might perceive all of our actions as being really positive, you know, but other people might actually see them as being not so positive. So yeah, absolutely, thank you. So yeah, finally, just a big thank you from both Zoe, Niamh and I for coming along today. Niamh, I don't know if you've got any final...
Yes, just a little for sure. Thanks to everybody for staying with us for today. I think we're all going to have very interesting meetings for the rest of the day and tomorrow in particular as we put some of what we heard into practice. So enjoy doing that. This was a little bit of a different session for us, so it's obviously more focused on the personal development side. As you see on the screen, let us know what you thought of us. You already have through some of your comments, but we'd love to get feedback. You can drop it into the chat now, or as always, you can use the mailbox address for that. Kerry mentioned in the chat as well, we have just two coming up, just 2 webinars left before year end. Lorraine Lee is going to be joining us, and this is a really interesting session as well around setting barriers and setting boundaries around our work and our personal lives and how those interact. So I think that's going to be a really interesting and insightful discussion, which is taking place on the 7th of December. Closely followed by creating a culture of innovation in your legal function. So more on the legal operations side, we're going to take a look at innovation, which is nice timing pre-Christmas and before we head into the new year. So yes, a big thank you to Claire and Zoe for a really engaging and practical and thought-provoking session today. We hope you find it useful, and we're looking forward to seeing you online at our next session. Have a great day.